Okay, hello and welcome to another Bitcoin podcast. We've reached episode 2, and I'm delighted to be joined today by everybody's favourite Bitcoin sailor, Knut Svanholm. Knut is probably the most prolific author of Bitcoin books. So he's just recently released Bitcoin, the Inverse of Clown World, which I've been trying to get through.
Oh, nice.
On a couple of occasions. So he co-authored that with Luke DeWolf, which I think takes your tally to 5 Bitcoin books now, if I'm right.
Yeah, depends a bit on how you count. Like the first book was just a collection of articles, and almost no one knows about that one. But then 4 proper Bitcoin books and a book on praxeology is what I've written after that. So yeah. 5 proper books.
So I don't think there's anybody else who's penned quite that many. But and obviously you also co-present the Bitcoin Infinity podcast. So Knut, welcome. Thanks for coming. And
nice to be here. Thank you.
So the main reason I actually wanted to get you on was because I've yet to receive my steak knives.
Yeah, I offered you free steak knives. Yes.
Yeah. So presumably they're in the post.
Didn't you get the memo that they're imaginary steak knives?
Ah, right. Okay.
They only exist in the you have to go to like a stage of hypnosis, and you'll believe they're there, and therefore you call a guy called El Mystico, and he will fix it for you.
And they're delivered as 1s and 0s, presumably. Yeah.
Yeah. So delivered as a figment of your imagination.
So when I was thinking about trying to introduce you, it's fair to say you've got a bit of an eclectic background. And the main reason I'm doing this is to try and sort of help Orange Pill my friends and family. So without doubt, they will not have read things like Everything Divided by 21 Million. You probably won't know who you are. So could you just give us a sort of brief introduction as to what your previous life was in Normie Land and how you now find yourself as a prominent voice in Bitcoin, please?
Yeah, after finishing public school and I was ready for university, then I started studying electronics engineering, but I was very tired of school at that point, and so I passed the math classes, but almost nothing else. And I decided to follow in my father's footsteps instead and have a career at sea. So I had a go at it, and eventually managed to get into the Merchant Marine Academy and become a master mariner. That was my university degree, which is the degree you get in order to become a fully fledged sea captain at some point. But before that, you have to do work as an officer or a mate on ships above a certain tonnage, and I found a ship that didn't really come up to that tonnage, but was a couple of tons too light. But I stayed there anyway because it was a very rewarding job. We were sailing around the Atlantic on a tall ship with high school students on board, and spent 6 days in each port. So I spent 8 years doing that, having no worry whatsoever in the world, and just owning a toothbrush and a laptop and a guitar, and sailing around the globe, minding my own business. And I had a lot of time to think, and I got to see a lot of different countries and stuff during that time. Eventually, I met my wife on board, by the way, my then girlfriend and now wife, and she's and we now have 2 children, 13 and 11. So when I had the children, I had to find another job closer to home, which is where I found when I found the offshore wind industry, and I was a skipper on one of the or not only one but many different small crew transfer vessels that took wind turbine technicians to wind farms in the Baltic Sea and the North Sea, and ended up in the office at that company. And my last fiat position was as a crewing manager, so I climbed the whole office hierarchy there, and ended up as a crewing manager, which is basically an HR manager. And but I quit 3 years ago, and we moved down to our holiday home in Spain, and I've been doing Bitcoin stuff ever since. Because in parallel to all this office career, and even on the CTVs, I wrote about Bitcoin and got more and more. My writings got more and more popular, especially the everything divided by 21 million memes really took off, and my life started to change. I got a lot of attention, and I figured maybe I can do this for a living. And here we are, I am. So I keep writing books, and nowadays I make money advising a handful of Bitcoin companies and doing talks around the world and selling books. And doing the pod. That's what I do nowadays.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So the transition is complete now, you think?
The transition from normie to Bitcoiner is definitely complete at this point. Yes.
So as I sort of mentioned, like Jeff was the first guest on the podcast, and we kind of discussed his thesis on deflation and technology and why that's incompatible with the current monetary system. So I wonder if you could perhaps just sort of. I've always struggled to orange pill people, basically, and I think the reason I've struggled is because I've always started with the solution rather than the problem. So I wonder if you could perhaps just outline the current problem before we sort of talk about the potential solution.
I'm sorry, there's someone knocking on the door here, so I need to take that, and just it might be the books I've been waiting for. So give me a minute.
No problem.
Yeah, sorry about that. There's a bunch of books delivered there.
Why do I feel that was planned all along?
It wasn't. I promise. But wait, Jeff. Yes, and orange pilling people. Yeah, I have a bit. Jeff played a key role in me becoming whatever it is I am at this point. Because just after we had moved down to Spain, like a week or two later, I get an SMS from Jeff Booth saying that they're traveling around, him and his family in Europe, and they want to come visit me in Spain. So I'm like, I had just been on like 1 or 2 pods with Jeff before that, but we had similar ideas about the world. So I guess he wanted to visit me, and I'm like, holy shit, it's Jeff Booth. Great. So we spent a night at my house. I grilled some steaks, and we sat around and played guitar and drank too much wine and philosophized. And he subsequently agreed to write the foreword for my next book, Everything Divided by 21 Million, and also helping me out with it and giving me advice on how and on editing and such.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jeff is. I greatly admire Jeff, and he played a key role in informing my views here during my latter Bitcoin years. And I mean, orange pilling people. Yes, I think, as you say, describing the problem is more important than describing the solution. Because most people have no idea. They've never questioned money. They don't think money is anything you necessarily can question. And they when they ask about Bitcoin, they ask like, how many dollars do you think a Bitcoin will be worth next year or something? They always, it's the mindset, thinking in Bitcoin terms is still very uncommon, and even most Bitcoiners still think in dollar terms. So there's no real transition into hyper Bitcoinization before we actually adopt Bitcoin and start thinking in Bitcoin terms, or at least acting as if Bitcoin is a given, as if this is safer than anything else, and it will go up over time in comparison to everything else. So we don't want debt. We don't want too many possessions. We want to, be a bit more sustainable and long-term thinking. Inevitably, that's the point you get to as a Bitcoiner. But yeah, orange pilling people is hard. It's which is partly why I chose to focus more on sort of conviction deepening. So I think both my books and the pod are more about reminding people why Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin is so awesome, and why Bitcoin is the thing to focus on, and why we need to give it our focus and attention. So I think that's what I'm doing more than orange pilling normies.
Yeah.
That the main underlying problem is inflation, and that certain people are in privileged positions and have access to an actual money printer, and certain people get to decide how many coins there are to be in circulation, or like how many dollars or euros or yuan or whatever there are to be in circulation. And in Bitcoin, that is not possible. That is, there is a fixed limit, and that's achieved by consensus in the network. We all agree that that's the number we want, and that it oughtn't be changed, which is a completely new thing for humanity. So I think this the discovery of Bitcoin was a much bigger thing than people realize. Yeah.
I think just picking up on something you said before is people have never really sort of consider the problem because they're not even aware of the problem. And I think it's almost like sort of the fish doesn't know that it even exists in water because it's constantly surrounded by it. And most people would say that even if they are aware of Bitcoin, that they wouldn't have time to investigate it, but they'd never question why they don't have the time to investigate it. So if you're sort of looking at how Bitcoin helps to solve this problem, you touched obviously on the fact that it has a fixed supply, so it can't be inflated. Also that it's a set of rules rather than that we all agree to, rather than something governed by rulers. I quite like the thing that I found quite sort of successful with talking to people is how Simon Dixon describes it. So, and I presume you're sort of familiar with him, and he talks about it as being money that you can own, money that you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply. And I wonder if you could just sort of look at those three descriptions and perhaps sort of break those down, because I think all three of those are important in the value proposition of Bitcoin. You do that in whatever order you want.
Yeah, the money is often described as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account, right? And I think what most people don't, I think those terms are flawed. So I think the term store of value is very flawed, because as we know, value is entirely subjective. How much you value something is subjective and also dynamic. It changes from time to time, so you can't really store value. So what it is more than a store of value is a medium of exchange over time. The thing, gold used to be a good store of value or medium of exchange over time, but it was lousy as a medium of exchange over space, over distance. And fiat is the other way around. It's good for medium of exchange over space, but not a good medium of exchange over time, because it loses value over time. So, and Bitcoin is both. And I think for a good money, for something to be an actually good money, you need both, and you need the over time naturally has to precede the over space aspect, because everything that happens in space also happens in time. Like you can't the temporal dimension is always there. So you make a transaction from one person to another, that money must have come from somewhere, or at an earlier point, like in time. It moves through time always. So I think this is the biggest thing that Bitcoin changes. And remind me again, what were the three categories you alluded to? I got a message here simultaneously, and I'm crap at multitasking.
So
what were the
basically,
what were the descriptions?
Yeah, Simon.
I got lost here.
he describes it as money you can own, money you can spend, and money that has a fixed supply. And I think those descriptions are really, really accurate and kind of help sort of focus in on what the value proposition is.
Yeah, and money you can own and fixed supply go hand in hand. You can't really own it if it doesn't have a fixed supply. Because if the supply can be inflated, then what you own is worth less and less over time. So you don't really own it. That's the thing. And money you can spend is basically just money you can transact with, or money you can give to other people. You can give up control. And this is interesting, because if you think about what ownership is, ownership is a legal term, and it's about the relationship between you, the human being, and an object. Or in other words, your property. That is the definition of your property. It's a thing that you have an ownership relationship with. But ownership is not the same as possession. So, for instance, I own this book here, but I can say you can have this book, and now you own it, but I still possess it. And you can say, Knut, can I have my book, please? And I can say, no, you can't. Sorry, I've decided to take it back. Which means that possession is in a way more important than ownership. Sometimes there's a conflict between the conflicts between human beings are almost exclusively about the difference between possession and ownership. If someone steals your car, you still own the car, but that guy is in possession of your car. So that's where the conflict arises, But Bitcoin is you can't really own a Bitcoin, since they're just information, and you can't really possess them either. The only reason that you that we can say that we own a Bitcoin is that we know how extremely unlikely it is for anyone else to guess the private key to that unlocks that particular UTXO. So the Bitcoins are therefore not physical at all, and they're not even on the internet, I would say, because everything on computers can be copied. The only thing that separates the Satoshi from any other type of data is that every Satoshi is tied to a secret somehow, a secret that you, the quote unquote owner of it, keeps in your head, which means that Satoshis don't really exist anywhere in physical space. They don't really exist anywhere on the internet. All that exists is the protocol, and certain UTXOs are bigger or smaller, but the Satoshis themselves are only movable because you keep a secret and you decide to reveal that secret to the world, and thereby send the Satoshi, creating another secret for another person. So regardless if you memorize your 12 seed words, or if you memorize your entire private key, or if you know the location to a password that unlocks a hardware wallet or whatever, At the end of the day, all owning a Bitcoin is keeping a secret, which means that the Bitcoins reside within their owners. They are two aspects of the same being. So we are all Satoshis. Like we are the Bitcoins. There is no distinction between the human being and the asset. And when you start to think about it like that, it becomes so much more than just money on the internet. It's literally a phenomenon that lives within us, and it makes us better. It gives us superpowers because we have something that cannot be taken away from us, that we can give to our descendants. It can be passed down through generations. It's completely different than anything else that has ever preceded it, and perhaps more importantly, anything that will ever there can't be a successor to it, since the only thing Bitcoin is an agreement on a fixed set of rules between people. And the reason that we agree on this specific set of rules is that these rules are more expensive to break, or to try to break, than to just follow. That's the only reason we agree on this specific set of rules. And what that creates is an absolutely finite thing, an absolutely finite number, the world's first and last digital pie, if you will, that you can split, that you can divide and give to different people in the form of this secret. And any replication of this is self-defeating, because the only thing this is resistance to replicability on the internet. That is what creates this finite number. And if the number isn't finite, if there can be copies of it that can have the same value, then the whole thing is pointless, which is why shitcoins are shit. So it's a one-time discovery of a finite number, which we can divide and store in our heads, so that it literally becomes a part of us. And that is, I think that is so much more than just money. We call it money because it was described as money and cash and whatnot in the white paper. But this could have been done with, like, Bitcoin could have existed without even ever mentioning money in the white paper. At the end of the day, it's just code. It's just mathematics and computer code that is visible to anyone and everyone. And the thing that unlocks the quote unquote asset, or the number, the scarce number, that makes it possible for us to teleport it between one another, is a secret kept in our brains. So it's a brain-to-brain network. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that completely.
Yeah, I went off on a lot of tangents there, but this is it's hard to describe what Bitcoin is, but I think you need to go this deep to actually understand why it's so important and why it's so different. And most people don't even get to the step of questioning what normal money is, or what fiat money is. They take their pounds and euros and dollars for granted and think that they've always been there and there's nothing we can do about that. But there are things you can do about that. You can opt out of it and you can use something else instead.
So, I mean, going off on the tangents is exactly why I wanted to speak to you, so please don't apologise for that.
It's what I do, I guess.
You talked about like possession and ownership, and while you were sort of saying that, I was thinking about the UK government confiscating, I think it was Venezuela's gold, and it was Venezuela owned it, but it was stored in the UK central bank, and yeah, ownership didn't really matter. Really, possession was the thing that mattered.
No, that's a great example. It doesn't matter if you have, unless you have physical possession. It doesn't matter if you own it. If your custodian has bigger guns than you do, and this has happened over and over and over again throughout history. That resources belonging to another nation have been confiscated by the nation that is currently custodying it, because they dislike something that the owning nation did, or that the current leadership of that owning nation did. I don't remember what it was for Venezuela, but it was sort of like when that was confiscated. I don't remember when that was, if it had something to do with them adopting socialism, but
Probably
either way,
just, yeah.
Yeah. Either way, it's not safe unless you possess it. And if you have a possession, so like I can say that I own and possess this house that I'm in right now. I do own it. I do have a legal claim to it, and I do possess it. But I have very few means of defending it. I mean, there aren't any machine gun turrets or anything installed, so I just have to trust the police force to defend it for me, sort of. And the country I live in and the municipality to take care of that. I've outsourced the defense of the property to other people. So I would say it's easier for an attacker to confiscate my house than it is to confiscate my Bitcoin, because you can point a gun at someone's head and say, "Give me all your Bitcoin," and the person may or may not give up a certain amount of Bitcoin, but you have no way of knowing if that was all the Bitcoin or just a fraction of it. And it's impossible to know how many Bitcoins any person on Earth has ever. Like you cannot know. You simply cannot know. And so what that does is that it makes violence or aggression, aggression is a better word, much less profitable than it used to be. Because you can't just come with guns and take stuff anymore. It's not that easy.
Hi, Knut. Sorry, I lost you
You're
there.
back.
Yeah, apologies about that. So I'll have to do some editing. So I'm sorry that you got cut off halfway through. Yeah. So
yeah, I can continue where I was. I think I
right.
know this by heart. So like, so the thing is, you cannot you cannot know how many Bitcoins another person has, and that's true for all people at all times. Which means you can point a gun at someone's head and say, "Give me all your Bitcoins," and they can give you X amount of Bitcoins, but you can never know if that was all they had, which completely redraws the map and reduces the profitability of aggressive behavior so much, so that it's better for you to provide something of value back to that person than to try to take it by force. And it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is, if it's a thief or a highway robber or a taxman or a central banker. All of them now have less ability. Their ability to take your stuff goes away on a Bitcoin standard, or at least becomes a lot less profitable. And I think that's one of the most underrated aspects of Bitcoin. As the saying goes, if goods and services don't cross borders, soldiers do, which is true on a micro as well as a macro scale. And Bitcoin makes sure that it's always cheaper to send goods and services over borders than soldiers. So yeah.
And
End of that particular rant.
And I think it's important to consider that there's almost two ways to confiscate your economic energy, if you like. So one is literally, like you say, by physical force, which Bitcoin disincentivizes because, as you say, it isn't in the physical realm. It's been reduced to information, and it's information that you can ultimately store in your head. And also, inflating the supply of what you're using is also confiscation as well. It's in many ways that's worse because it's theft, but it's theft via kind of pickpocketing because most people don't know that it's going on in the first place.
I would call that a form of violence. because you're enforcing your will upon someone else. And since the violent part is that you're forced to use, in most countries, you're forced to use a specific form of money to pay your taxes, which in themselves are theft. But in not accepting any other currencies than a specific national currency for the tax payment, the government is basically forcing you to use a type of money that a small segment of the population have access to the printer of. So I would say that is violent. That is a violent takeover of your property. What should rightfully be yours.
I think it's in your new book, you make the distinction between something being voluntary and consensual. And I think you use the example of taxation. Could you just actually, while we're on the subject, could you just explain that? Because I found that really interesting, and there's a little anecdote in there that you might want to put in as well, which is quite funny.
It ties into the whole ownership and possession thing in a way, that dichotomy. So like if I point a gun to your head and say, give me all your money, and you do, then you voluntarily gave up your money, but only because I threatened you. So this was not consensual. It was voluntary, but not consensual. And the same is true for the taxman. You may voluntarily pay your taxes, but in many cases, it's certainly not consensual. And if it is consensual, it's probably because the taxman has fooled you that there's some value to that. So, this goes back to all the way down to argumentation ethics. So, all human conflicts are about property. Like if you take if you take this all the way down to first principles, like it comes down to a debate about who owns what. Like how we are human beings, we find ourselves on this planet. There are various resources around. Some are scarce, some are abundant, and often somewhere in between the two. So how do we divide them between ourselves properly? Then you have to decide on, like, is there a way to do this that is fair and that is valid for all people at all times? What's the ethical point of view here? What's the ethical way to think about who owns what and who ought to own what? And the first thing is to admit that you own your own body. Like, that's where you have to start. If you argue against the notion that you own your own body, the person arguing against that will have to use his body to make the argument. So you have to use your tongue and your lips and your vocal cords to argue, and probably your hands and doing gestures. So in trying to argue against the ownership of your own body, you are disproving your own thesis by your action. So your actions literally speaks louder than your words. It's your action that physically speaks the words. So actions are more important than words, and thereby you can deduct that we own our own bodies. So what is argumentation? It's a use of our bodies to convey a message to the other person. And if we have a conflict over some type of property, because I'm skipping a step here, so let me lay out the foundations of Austrian economics here. So if you admit that you own your own body, and by extension you also own the stuff that you found in nature. So if I find a stick, you can't just walk up to me and say, "Give me that stick, please." There is a property conflict, so we will have to resolve that somehow. Either you can knock me out and take the stick, or you can argue for why I ought to give you the stick. So this is back to, humans have two ways of resolving conflict over property, or conflict in general, and the one is communication and the other is violence. If we're arguing, by engaging in argument at all, we, by our action, by using our body that we have, we are admitting that property rights is a thing. because we are using our faculties to convey a message, which means that we do believe that we own our own bodies and that we have free will, and that we by extension then prefer communication to violence when it comes to ownership. So if I argue with you, and then after the argument is resolved and we agree to something, if I use violence anyway and just take your stuff, even though we agreed I couldn't, then we weren't arguing. I was just bullying you. So an argument with a taxman is not really an argument, because he's going to take your stuff anyway. So the taxman is just bullying you and any political debate is actually just the politicians mocking you for not having the full force of the police force and the army to back you up when they say that they own something that they very clearly do not own, which is your stuff that you acquired by exchanging stuff of value for giving up stuff that other people found valuable to give you something of value back. So that's usually the case, unless your stuff is stolen in itself. But the whole thing is like a popularity contest every 4 years does not make theft any more ethical or any more right from a utilitarian perspective, or from a what's the word, objectivist perspective, which is the only framework for coordinating human beings that can be true for all times. So what Bitcoin introduced by reducing the profitability of violence is like, it's just this beautiful form of mathematics and way of cooperating with one another is pointing out that we'd all be better off if we just didn't aggress against one another. It's bad to attack your fellow man. It's much better to trade with them. And to interact. And what is trade? It's just peaceful interaction. That is what it is. Right now, I'm on your pod ranting about stuff, and you invited me to the pod because we both find it valuable to spend time with one another. I find it valuable to talk to you, and you find it valuable to talk to me. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been on this call. So we're engaged in a trade. We're trading our time and our energy to one another. So every human interaction that isn't violent is a trade. That's all trade is. So and what Bitcoin points out, by reducing the profitability of an attack to its actual cost, because no one can dilute the money supply. So this is the actual cost of attack. And the attack is so non-profitable that it's pointless. That means that we had this in us all along. If we humans had just refrained from aggression and worked with one another and traded stuff and cooperated, then we'd all be better off. And when you think about it, it's pretty obvious that the human race would be better off if we didn't do bad things, basically. And I think there's something very deep here, and it's kind of hard to explain. But Bitcoin is a tool for peace in this sense. It's sort of a defensive mechanism. It's a form of mental armor against theft. Just like armor could protect you from swords and spears and stuff back in the day, and still can. If you have a sort of mental shield against violence, because no one can know how many Bitcoins you have, then it reduces the incentive for a bad actor to attack you. Yes, this is long and convoluted, and maybe not for newbies, but anyway. There are no easy ways of explaining this stuff, and it's completely tied to libertarian philosophy. Understanding Bitcoin requires you to understand Austrian economics and anarcho-capitalism / libertarianism, consensualism, or whatever. It requires you to understand why consensual interaction is always preferable to forceful interaction.
I think that was definitely heightened in 2020 as well, when you talked about owning your own body. But perhaps we won't go into that. But
my body, my choice.
Well,
somehow didn't apply to vaccines.
You don't have to be an anti-vaxxer just to.
And that's another thing. They say that you are free to travel and you are free to do this and that, if you do this and that and that and that and that, which means you aren't free to travel. And you weren't before COVID. You aren't after COVID, because you need something called a passport, which is a temporary political measure from 100 years back that somehow became permanent. But even the passport it's just a construct. It's not real. And when people stop you at a border to look at your passport, they are infringing on your natural rights. They have no right to stop you from leaving a certain jurisdiction. That is just weird.
Yeah, the right to be left alone, I think, as you've put it at some point.
Exactly. That's how I. That's one of my favorite framings. I took that from Titus Gebel of the Free Cities Foundation, and I really love it. Like there can only be, if you want a human right to be valid and true for all human beings at all points in time, the only one that can be true is the right to be left alone, because all other human rights infringe upon another person's right to be left alone. So if I say that the housing is a human right, someone needs to build a house. And if it's a human right, someone needs to be forced to build the house somehow, or paid with tax money, which is forcing other people to pay for the house, which in itself violates the right to be left alone. So the right to be left alone is the underlying fundamental right that supersedes all other rights from an ethical perspective.
When people often talk about wanting to spend time in nature, and I like to do that as well. And sometimes it's to sort of look at the trees and to touch grass and to listen to flowing water and birds and stuff. But when you break it down, most of the time when you're spending time in nature, you are on your own, and it's just literally, it's the right to be left alone in nature. That's the way I've always looked at it. But you've obviously talked about you've made this transition fully into Bitcoin, and I'm kind of in the middle. I've got sort of part of my life in normie land, fiat land, and a small part, but hopefully a growing part in the land of Bitcoin. And what I've found in Bitcoin is that people are, everything seems to be more consensual. People do seem to be very, very sort of generous with their time. And when you kind of juxtapose the two worlds, one is about cooperation and one feels like a sort of a zero-sum game where you must grab everything as quickly as you can, otherwise someone's going to take it from you. And just what you were saying there before, I think that rings true. And perhaps the more time you spend in Bitcoin, the more you kind of understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes deep because we Bitcoiners, since we are our Satoshis, and we know that they go up in value the more people that want them, because supply is limited, completely limited, and demand is going up or down. But in the long run, if we orange pill more people, it can only go up, which means that the purchasing power of Bitcoin can go up forever, can and will go up forever. So if we want that to happen, what we should do is make Bitcoin more successful. And how do we do that? We do that by making other Bitcoiners more successful. We are incentivized to help one another and cooperate. We're not incentivized to because we know it's not a zero-sum game. It's a positive-sum game, and everything that's good for another Bitcoiner is good for me in a very literal, egocentric way. It's good for me that the value of Bitcoin goes up. It's good for you that the value of Bitcoin goes up. So instead of fighting one another, we are truly incentivized to cooperate. And I think this aspect is so underrated here, and we just barely scratched the surface of what this implies. It means we're getting rewarded for being awesome to one another. That's just fantastic, I think.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
I'm
I'm
definitely finding it. So yeah,
what a great thing! Like if we can.
I've been kind of shocked, to be honest with you. I wasn't really expecting to get you or Jeff on here, to be honest with you, but it's been really easy. It's been really, really frictionless, and sort of people are just quite generous with the time, and like I say, it's people just helping each other to sort of build the future that perhaps we can see that perhaps others can't. Leading, so obviously you've written this book, Bitcoin Universe: A Clown World, but you're perhaps best known for Everything Divided by 21 Million, which I think started off as a meme. Can you just sort of explain that premise? Because that's when you dig deep into Everything Divided by 21 Million, it's a really powerful concept. So could you just perhaps just sort of explain where that came from and what it means?
Well, it's what I alluded to earlier. So about the Bitcoin having fixed supply. So the only thing that is a variable here is the demand, and the demand. Whenever another person demands Bitcoin, or if only the Bitcoiners that are around currently want more Bitcoin rather than less, then the price can't go anywhere but up. So it's sort of like the GameStop stock, like when people were hodling that, except there's no one that can pull the plug or influence it in the other way. It is eventually, if it just keeps working, eventually it will eat everything. Because why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't you want all your money in Bitcoin at one point? Why would you want any of it in fiat in the long run? Like and the people who've seen it, I don't know of a properly orange pill Bitcoiner that is ever going back or wanting, or who wants less Bitcoin. And since we all want more of it, and there's a finite supply, the sooner or later, like Everything Divided by 21 Million, or every other item of value can on a Bitcoin standard will be priced in Bitcoin, so it can incorporate or encapsulate the entire world economy at some point. And even after that, or especially after that, there is still more stuff being produced. There are still more goods and services coming onto the market, which means prices go down forever on this thing. So it's a much bigger idea than people are, and I think that has to do with why it's so hard to understand for people. Because that's an invention or a discovery bigger than the wheel or the ability to make fire. It's like or the internet or anything. It's humanity's absolute greatest discovery by far, because we've solved it now. We have world peace now. We have only cooperation and limitless potential. All of that is in Bitcoin.
And the reason I found like Jeff's work so important is because I think he's one of the really few people, even in Bitcoin, that actually genuinely uses Bitcoin as the yardstick, as the measuring tool, and that's all it really is. It's a fixed unit of measurement that is never going to change. And what you just said there was that it's not just everything divided by 21 million now. It's actually everything into the future forever that's ever produced is always going to be.
Yeah. And that's the sentence that was in the original article that spurred the meme. Imagine everything there is and everything that ever will be divided by 21 million. So that's the original quote.
So I just want to sort of change direction a little bit. And I won't sort of keep you much longer. I think we're sort of coming up to sort of time, but I wondered if you happened to watch Seyfeddine's podcast about sort of a week or two ago with Michael Saylor. I wonder if you've seen that. Yeah,
I did. This is one of the few podcasts I actually listened to. So I watched
it was obviously raised a bit of controversy because they kind of, at times it was a little bit uncomfortable to watch because they were sort of arguing a little bit, and it felt a bit like sort of watching your parents fall out. But it seemed to me that, and that there's a bit in your book about slay your heroes, and probably Michael Saylor is a bit of a hero for a lot of people, but they discuss lending, and it seems that Michael, and I might be interpreting this wrong, but he completely buys the store of value aspect of Bitcoin, but doesn't seem to see it becoming a medium of exchange. And this is something that Jeff's kind of warned against might be an attack vector in the future, that we would see layer 2 and this idea of it being scaled on layer 2 as a medium of exchange being attacked. I just wondered what your thoughts were on this, because Michael clearly understands it on a deep level, but it has to become a medium of exchange at some point. Or does it just coexist alongside the dollar, and the dollar is the medium of exchange?
No, the many thoughts around this, and I do think Safe absolutely crushed it in that debate, and he won it. And I think Michael was sort of refusing to. He didn't hear what Safe was actually saying. He was like defending it from the wrong angle here and there. I respect them both a lot, and I think I do not think Bitcoin fails just because it is rarely used as a medium of exchange. I do think that the medium of exchange over time is more important than the medium of exchange over space, because as long as you have the over time aspect or the store of value aspect, eventually people will use it as a medium of exchange over space as well. And what Michael is very much coming from the fiat world when he says that it's pointless to hold an asset that doesn't generate yield. So yes, I do think that there will be Bitcoin banks in the future, and it will look like something like on the gold standard. But fractional reserve banking started on the gold standard, and there's nothing inherently wrong with fractional reserve banking as long as the people putting up the money are aware of what's going on and to what extent. So if it's transparent, there's nothing morally wrong about it. So you could do, and this is where I slightly disagree with Seyfeddine, I guess, or maybe not, maybe I'm misquoting him here, but if you had a transparent bank that were doing fractional reserve banking, so I put 10 Bitcoins in that bank, and I know that they're using a portion of that in order to make other investments to at the end of the year give me a bit of interest on my deposit to them. So I'm basically lending it to them to deposit to others, and they in turn can lend that out to other people and demand interest paid back, which then translates to my interest, and the bank makes money off of the difference between the lender and the borrower. The total amount of lenders and borrowers. And the reason that fractional reserve becomes so much harder because a fractional reserve means that the banker doesn't have to have as many Bitcoins or gold or whatever in his reserves as he lends out. He lends out more, so he gives out more receipts than there is available stuff in the bank vault to withdraw, which in historic times led to whenever there was a bank run, that bank got bankrupt and went down, and all the depositors had to pay for that. There were no bailouts back in the day. But nowadays we have central banking and governments that choose to avoid disaster. They bail out the bank, which is effectively forcing everyone else, every other taxpayer, to pay for the people who were dumb enough to trust that bank. You see where I'm getting at here? On a Bitcoin standard, all of this is much harder to do because it's transparent. But there's nothing ethically wrong with the practice as long as it's transparent and as long as the depositor knows what he's doing. And I do think Safe is right that the interest rates would, first of all, they would at first be very much higher because people have no incentive to lend out their Bitcoins. But then again, everyone has a time preference. So there will always be a discount on the future in comparison to the now. So there will always be people who are willing to borrow and always people who are willing to lend out money. But on a sound money standard with an absolute finite supply, since that money goes up in value over time rather than down, then the discount on the future is the future is already discounted by number go up. You see where I'm getting at? So I think and Michael in that interview, he's very much coming from a dollar perspective or a fiat perspective, where the only yield on having capital is interest. But if you have number go up, if you have an absolutely finite thing, then number goes up for everyone. So if you have a large stock of Bitcoin, the value, the purchasing power of that Bitcoin goes up because it reflects the increased productivity of everything else. So the beauty of that is that Bitcoin is, since Bitcoins are, the responsibility for your Bitcoins are entirely yours, like not your keys, not your coins. So at some point, it does make sense to sell off some of your stack, because that's quite a large risk that you are entirely responsible, regardless if you have multi-sig setups and whatnot. You can have amnesia, you can get into an accident, like unforeseen things can happen. So it might make sense to diversify at some point. Best practice to do it 10 years down the line at least, because then number will have gone up sufficiently for you to not have to give up that big of a percentage of your stack. Yeah, that I think that's about it.
I've got this whole sort of idea
topic
for an article, and I didn't quite know where to sort of go with it. But of this, what you just said there, of this perception of Bitcoin potentially being almost too valuable for its own good. But is there such a thing as being too valuable?
No, I don't think so. And you can always but this is the thing. If you look at Bitcoin address data, you can see that addresses with 10,000 Bitcoins or more in them are shrinking in numbers, and addresses with 1 Bitcoin or less in them are growing in numbers. So Bitcoin is actually redistributing wealth by doing the literal opposite of what those that claim to be redistributing wealth are doing. And I think this is so beautiful. This is what an absolutely finite asset that lives in your head does to the economy. It does level out everything, and it makes everyone wealthier. Everyone who has Bitcoin is better off now than, regardless. It's almost an all-time high right now, right? So whenever Bitcoin's at an all-time high, we're all better off. Like every single Bitcoiner is better off than they were. So all boats actually did rise with the tide. And I would say that even no coiners are better off by Bitcoiners being successful, because if we can smoothen out the free market, like if we can collaborate, like we talked about before, that we're incentivized to collaborate, and we can make the free market a more efficient machine, then the prices of everything drops, even in fiat terms. So everyone's better off by the success of Bitcoin. It's just so insanely powerful, and there's so many undetectable effects that are there and are doing things to everything. So yeah, I think it's vastly underrated how great Bitcoin is.
I think the sort of second and third order effects are
the yield that yeah. second and third order effect. Alan Farrington has a T-shirt that says "The yield are the friends you make along the way," and I think that's great because in Bitcoin that's literally true. The yield are the friends you make along the way because they are the satoshis, so they are part of the yield. And getting to know more Bitcoiners means if I have one Bitcoiner friend, then I have one person to make transactions with. If I had two Bitcoiner friends, then we as a network each have two people to make connections with. And if we're four, there's even more connections, and we get to Metcalfe's law. The value of any communications network is the square of its proportional to the square of its users. That's true for Bitcoin too, because it is a communications network, which means that the value of the functionality of the network is exponential by its very nature, and that's just one aspect of it. And then you have the uncensorable and absolutely finite, teleportable, all of that stuff on top of the already exponential effect from just Metcalfe's law in a communications network. So I think it's simply mind-boggling, and this is why I can't stop thinking about this, and I can't stop talking about it.
I'm the same. Yeah, just people don't want to hear it for some reason, but we'll see. But...
No, because they have their views of the world, and they have their concepts and how they think the world works. But now, if they could just admit some basic things like non-aggression is better than aggression, like for everyone, forever, then if they could just see that, then they would cling on to Bitcoin immediately.
I wrote this. I've got a Substack as well, and I wrote this article about. And I must just point out, I wrote this before I actually read Bitcoin: The Inverse of Clown World, and I kind of based it on Robinson Crusoe and this idea of my hero in the story was called Robinson Nakamoto, and he kind of lands on a desert island. He has to start again, and it's kind of like an allegory for deflation, but based on a desert island. And when you were sort of constantly quoting Robinson Crusoe in the book, it was like, oh, this is brilliant. But this is another sort of first principle thing.
The praxeology book.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah. My praxeology book is based on Robinson Crusoe. There's Robinson Crusoe quotes in every single chapter.
That's the one,
I realized halfway through the process of writing that yeah. So, you said inverse of clown world, but you meant praxeology then, I guess.
But and just using...
Yeah. No, but it's a great analogy because and you introduce Friday, and all of a sudden there's another person there, and you can explain everything in economics from a Robinson Crusoe perspective. Yes,
I think I introduced Jamie and Jerome in my story, so and that didn't go too well. So I don't know if you've sort of got
Simon and Powell.
I've got if you've got a few more minutes, but we'll sort of try and sort of wrap this up now.
Sure.
There's so many sort of things that I'd like to sort of talk to you about. There's things about what the fiat standard has potentially sort of cost humans over the years, and there's other things I've sort of written down. There's one little thing that I'd really like to just to sort of get your opinion on, because there's in your new book you talk about that which you can do without you own, and I think that was a quote from your grandfather, wasn't it? Yeah, and can you just kind of just sort of touch on that? Yes. Because it's to do with sort of lessening consumerism, but just as a sort of a final message for people.
Yeah, the easiest way to give it to the man is minimalism. And this is the thing: if you crave an object or whatever it is you crave, if you manage to stoically elevate yourself above that craving, if you will, and rid yourself of that craving, then you own the thing instead of the thing owning you. So if you crave a Lamborghini, then that Lamborghini owns you in a sense, because it has a grip over you. Like you are going to spend your time and effort working for that thing. But if you don't crave a Lamborghini, if you have no urge whatsoever to ever own a Lamborghini, then you own all the Lamborghinis, because you decide, you have power over them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think the deflationary nature of Bitcoin is sort of pointing this out to everyone. Like, if I have something that I know will go up in value over time, why would I ever exchange that for anything else? If I know that the thing can get me more things and more life quality, the only trade-off is patience. Why wouldn't I just be patient? So and this is, remember, Bitcoin is just an agreement on a fixed set of rules, which allows for this finite number and everything. But at the end of the day, it's just a way for human beings to interact with one another that is not wasteful. So the thing it points out is that no, we don't need all the shit. We just need to be patient and nice to one another. And if we want something, if we figure out something that will help us all and that will improve our lives greatly, then sure. All right, I think you lost me just at the end there. So if we construct something that improves our lives greatly, like, and if we get that, then of course we'd want that. But that means is that all the unnecessary consumerism goes away, and only the high quality stuff stays. Equality is the opposite of quality in a way, like this. So what you should strive for is not more equality, it's more quality. And that's a bit of a tangent, but if tie it back to that which you can do without your own. If you have something that goes up in value over time, you would rather keep that and just be patient than buy a lot of frivolous shit. So you get away from consumerism. And consumerism is so tied to inflation. If you know that something is going down in value over time, and the prices are going up over time, then you want to spend as fast as possible. Bitcoin is the literal opposite. It's the inverse of that. The inverse of clown world. You know, you instead you choose to wait always, unless the deal is really, really, really good. Or unless your stack is so big that you don't know what you or your descendants will ever do with all that money, so you start spending a little on top, which in turn is the great equalizers that disperses.
Yeah.
Is that a word? The Bitcoin across all the other.
Yeah, and that's how it becomes a medium of exchange in time, I suppose. So as the purchasing power increases, the people who are sort of early adopters are more incentivized to spend that, and that's how it, like you say, disperses over time. And but yeah, again,
which is why I don't worry about the medium of exchange over space aspect at all, almost, because it's so it is so superficial in comparison to the number go up and medium exchange over time aspect.
Well, is there sort of anywhere you'd like to sort of send people? Obviously, please buy that book. We haven't even talked about the amount of irreverent humor in the book, and I think it's the only Bitcoin book that's actually made me laugh out loud. In particular, the passage on lubrication, and so, but also buy that one as well. It's a great place to start, and
glad you.
And I will leave a review as well. So
you can find all my books and all my stuff. Yeah, great. You can find all my books and stuff at bitcoininfinity.com. That will redirect you to the Bitcoin Infinity store. And also there's a way to get to the Bitcoin Infinity show from there. those are also .coms if you want to go directly. But bitcoininfinity.com will take you to our website where we accept Bitcoin worldwide and ship worldwide, and where you can get all the T-shirts and all the books and whatnot from there. The books are of course also available on Amazon. We the pod or the Bitcoin Infinity show is posted on YouTube and X and all sorts of platforms, including the Bitcoin ones. And we're going Nostr first now. So the episodes are first posted on Nostr, which also ties into Fountain, which is a great app where you can listen to the episodes. But one day early, you can get access to the pod on Nostr. And also, going forward here, the plan is to release all the books for free with an accompanying video where Luke and I talk about that specific chapter on Nostr only. And the plan is to release them chapter by chapter here over the coming year and a half, something. So one chapter a week is going to be released on Nostr. And yeah, I'm traveling around to as many conferences as I can, and I hope to see all of you other Bitcoiners there and hang out and do fun stuff together.
Okay.
Lean into Bitcoin and start get to know other Bitcoiners and start being awesome to one another. That is the way.
I've finally managed to convince my family we're going to watch Real Bedford tomorrow. So I've loaded up a Lightning wallet and I'm sort of ready to go. And I think we're going to do cheat code next year as well. So it's going to be obviously UK based, but so perhaps see you there at some point. But Knut, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks for your patience with my internet connection. I've definitely got some editing to do, and I'll have to look into that. But hopefully the message hasn't been deterred. And again, thanks for your thoughts. Thanks for all your tangents. Thanks for your books. And I'll put everything in the show notes and point people towards you, and hopefully they can sort of discover you for themselves. With your permission, and if I can, I'd like to. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, I've stayed in the recording at all times just to not fuck up the recording for you. So I know how Riverside works. I'll have to stay a bit
perfect.
longer.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'll just.
But you said something. You cut off when you said, like, with my permission, you would like to do something. With your permission,
I'd like to put a link into. So one of the things I watched a few of your older podcasts, and I watched one that you did with Peter McCormack, I think in 2021. And right towards the end, you talked about your music career, and I sort of looked it up online, and I found the song that I think was on Pirate Bay that went viral. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what was that? You found an old music video?
Yes.
Which one?
I found the music video that went viral on Pirate Bay. I wonder if I could perhaps put a link to that in the show notes, because
absolutely,
it's a great song. It's a really great song. So yeah,
thank you.
My daughter enjoyed it as well. So
put that wherever you want.
So all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll leave it there before I throw my laptop out the window, and I'll do some editing. But thanks for your patience, and I'm going to go and move house and find a better internet connection. But Knut Svanholm, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and great to meet you, and hopefully meet you in person one day.
Yeah, you too, Andy, and good luck with your podcast. You might need to upgrade your internet connection, but other than that, you've got it going. And you said it was easy to get a hold of Jeff and me, and I think you will be mind blown by how easy it is to connect with people in this space. It's just to reach out, lean in.
I will do.
Do the
Appreciate
stuff.
it, Knut. Thanks so much. All right. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.